Hi everyone, here's the Bookchemist once again. Today I'm reviewing Hag-Seed by Margaret Atwood, which is part of a series called the Hogarth Shakespeare, where a series of all-star writers, very famous, very talented writers, Howard Jacobson, Jeanette Winterson, Atwood herself, and several others, basically tackle some Shakespeare plays and rewrite them in novel form. I didn't even, I mean, I knew about the series, but I didn't remember that this was part of that series when I picked up this book. I only marginally remembered it was about Shakespeare's The Tempest, and I approached it without knowing much about the series, and first things first, I quite loved it. It was a lovely experience. That's probably the best definition that comes to my mind. But what about The Tempest? What about its source text? Now, I have a love-hate relationship with The Tempest. A few years ago, it was probably my favorite Shakespeare plays, most notably because of its most, cinematic and spectacular elements. There's a character in it who is basically a fish person, and if you followed some of my videos, you know that fish people in literature are an automatic win for me. I'm going to love them no matter what. There's a video I think on my channel which is ancient about my favorite Shakespeare comedies, and it's likely that The Tempest was on top of it. But then, after a few years, once I'd studied more Shakespeare plays, during my years as a student in university, both as an undergraduate, as a graduate student, it became kinda clear to me that The Tempest is possibly a minor play. When you study it face to face with stuff such as Macbeth, Hamlet, Othello, it's not necessarily that I like those plays more, but you do realize that the Tempest is flawed in many ways. There's so much that I find relatable about The Tempest. The main character is from Milan, I'm from Monza, which is close enough. He basically gets into trouble because he'd like to stay at home and read all day instead of, doing the shit he's supposed to be doing. Wouldn't we all? And yeah, in general, that spectacular element which I mentioned makes it a very entertaining, very thrilling play to read about and to discuss. But actually, especially when you see it performed, in my personal experience, it was always sort of disappointing. That's probably because, the many supernatural elements of The Tempest, you can't possibly represent them. You can't possibly do them justice, whether you're, you're staging the play in a theater, whether you're watching a movie. It's a bit like with Macbeth and the witches. The witches in Macbeth are scary as fuck when you read about them in the play, but then when you see them on stage or on screen, they are either kinda ridiculous or they're not that scary at all. Only very rarely some adaptations manage to, portray them in all of their sinister element, in all of their sinister power. The Tempest is that, but for the whole of the play. So many of the characters, you can't really do them justice. Prospero too. Easy a ridiculous old coot, Easy a powerful wizard. That's not clear, it's difficult to represent him and to do him justice once again. And yet at the same time, The Tempest features some of my favorite Shakespeare passages. There's the whole sometimes a thousand twangling instruments speech by Caliban, which is touching and beautiful, and there's the whole we are such stuff as dreams are made of speech by Prospero, which is great, and which is, at least where I'm from, it's amazingly misrepresented and, misquoted in advertising. It's usually quoted as being a speech, that goes like, oh, we can achieve all we want because we are made, we are of the stuff dreams are made of. But no, what that speech is saying is that everything is shit and nothing matters at all. All of these things considered, considering all of these ambivalent elements within The Tempest, what kind of book is Hag-Seed? Hag-Seed is a absolutely thrilling, absolutely addictive kind of narrative. It's made of very short chapters. It flows beautifully. It has a compelling, a compelling plot at its core, and it is not so much an adaptation of The Tempest, not so much a rewriting of it, but sort of a commentary on The Tempest. And in that sense, it makes it clear and, it makes explicit all of these ambivalent elements of The Tempest. This is the kind of book that you will love if you are a Tempest fan, but you will probably love even more if you are not quite sure whether you like The Tempest, because the characters in it too reflect themselves about the contradictions of this play, about the paradoxes of this play, which is in so many ways a play about, you know, renouncing magic. That, you know, so many people draw parallels between that and the way Shakespeare was renouncing his role as a playwright. And, you know, this blurring of the line, of the distinction between magic and fiction is at the heart of the novel's plot too. And this novel features some beautiful passages on the way fiction, meant as escapism, as a way of escaping reality and your traumas, can become a powerful drug and can become something that makes you forget the distinction between what's imaginary and what's real. In that sense, this could have easily been a much stronger book with a much stronger plot and a much more, you know, disturbing outcome, but in the end it wasn't, and I think that's good. On the one hand, because this is still, you know, the adaptation of a comedy, or at least a tragic comedy, and on the other hand, because this makes the book, the way the book is handled, the way the plot is handled, makes for a very refreshing and very rewarding reading. It could have been a stronger book, but I'm not necessarily sure it would have been, you know, a better book had Atwood decided to play, you know, to be crueler toward her characters. As for Atwood herself, I am a fan of her fiction. I'm probably not her #1 fan out there, most notably because my main issue with Atwood is that when I read, every time I read her books, it always struck me, you know, I always had the feeling that there is a sort of a pedantic note in her fiction that's a little bit too strong, and that doesn't really transpire from the narrative and from the characters, but more from, you know, a narrator and, you know, a narrative structure that definitely wants to hammer a specific topic into the reader's mind, or a specific, you know, social or political point. Here, that, you know, Hag-Seed is like that too, absolutely. It's very clear, all of the points the author wants to raise about The Tempest, about its adaptation, about its peculiarities, but that is in some ways justified. Why is that? Because this is not really an adaptation of The Tempest, this is not really, you know, a rewriting of The Tempest, as much as it is pretty much the coolest university class, college class about The Tempest you will ever take. Really, this reads very much like a critical commentary on The Tempest, written by one of the world's most talented writers. It is, you know, if you've studied The Tempest in college, at university, you will probably already know many of the things Atwood says about the book. The way that Prospero's speech in the second scene of the first act is boring as shit, and that directors throughout history had to cope with the fact that that is a needed speech. It's an expository speech that makes you understand the whole play, but it's, again, it's boring as fuck. And, you know, Prospero himself is conscious of that, and, you know, it seems like his daughter who is listening to him is, you know, constantly falling asleep, and he has to wake her up all the time, you know, so she can follow the plot. Or the fact that this is a play about, you know, politics, about power struggles, about the way different types of people react to power and conceive power in different ways. All of these are things you will already know if you've studied The Tempest at university, and all of these are things that are beautifully explored in Hag-Seed. Now, is that a problem? Do I have an issue with that? No, I don't, but, you know, it's a bit like when you are at, you know, at elementary school, and they make you watch a movie about, I don't know, volcanoes or earthquakes or whatever. It's fun, it's great, it's better than listening to the teacher, but the fact that you are learning something all the same, like, sort of takes the edge of the pleasure of watching the movie. It's kind of the same here, but I mean, again, I didn't have a problem with the didactic note in Hag-Seed. Some people out there, I mean, large chunks of this book consist of an old man explaining what The Tempest is about to the actors who are going to perform the play in the novel. So, there you go. If you have a problem, if you don't think you're going to like that type of didactic narrative, this may not necessarily be the book for you, but once again, it's a lovely experience, it's refreshing, rewarding, very fast, flows beautifully, and I was utterly satisfied with it. It actually made me feel like checking out more of the of Hogarth Shakespeare series. In particular, I'd like to read Howard Jacobson's adaptation of The Merchant of Venice. Merchant of Venice is another one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. I'll let you know if when I get around to read that one too. Thank you for watching the video, and do let me know what you think about Hag-Seed, if you agree with my very superficial opinions on Atwood's fiction, whatever passes through your mind in the comment section below. Thank you again, guys. Bye, guys.